My name is William. I have spent the last 35 years of my life standing behind a wooden pulpit in a small town in Georgia, trying to explain the mysteries of God to people who, like me, were just trying to get through the week. I am 65 years old. I've lived a life of quiet service, or so I thought. But 8 days ago, on the night of April 6th, everything I thought I knew about my faith, and specifically about my marriage, was stripped away and replaced with something far more beautiful and far more demanding. I know how people look at preachers. They think we have it all figured out, or they think we're just selling a comfortable story to help people sleep at night. But I'm standing here today, not as a man with a sermon, but as a man who died and was sent back with a message he wasn't allowed to keep. The night it happened, the world felt like it was dissolving into water. That Georgia rain is something else. It doesn't just fall, it occupies the air until you feel like you're breathing through a wet cloth. I had just left the hospital after praying with a family whose patriarch was slipping away. It's the kind of work I've done 1,000 times. I was tired. My mind was already on the cup of tea Linda would have waiting for me. And I was driving perhaps a little too slow for the conditions. Then the woods seemed to exhale a deer directly into my path. There was no time for a decision, only a reflex. I felt the tires lose their grip, that sickening sensation of the steering wheel becoming a useless toy in my hands. The car spun, a graceful, terrifying waltz across the blacktop, and then everything ended in a sound like a hammer hitting an anvil. They told me later the impact with the concrete culvert was perfect, if you can call a tragedy perfect. It stopped the car instantly. My heart, perhaps weary from 65 years of carrying other people's burdens, simply gave up. It didn't flutter, it just stopped. Deputy Miller was right behind me. He told me he saw my taillights vanish into the ditch. He was at my door in seconds. He said the silence in that car was heavier than the rain outside. He and the first responders fought for me in the mud. They used the shocks, they used their hands to pump life into a chest that felt like it was done with the world. For 12 minutes, I was not among the living. I was gone. But from my perspective, the darkness of that ditch didn't last more than a heartbeat. I didn't feel the cold or the wet. I didn't feel the broken glass or the smell of gasoline. I felt a sudden, sharp transition into a place where the concept of hurt didn't exist. I was standing in a field. Now, I've seen some beautiful pastures in Georgia, especially when the sun is setting and the grass looks like it's made of copper. But this was different. This wasn't just light hitting grass. The grass itself seemed to be made of light. Every blade had its own life, its own song. There was no wind, yet everything moved with a rhythm that felt like breathing. I looked down at my hands. They weren't the hands of a 65-year-old man anymore. The spots were gone, the tremors were gone, but I still felt like myself. I felt like the truest version of myself, the version God intended before the world got its hands on me. And then, far off, across that golden expanse, I saw a figure. He wasn't rushing, but he was covering ground with a steady, purposeful gait. As he got closer, the atmosphere changed. It wasn't just peace anymore. It was a joy so intense it felt like it might burst my chest open. It was Jesus. I want to be careful how I describe him, because I don't want to fall into the trap of using religious cliches. He didn't look like the paintings in my church basement. He looked more real than anyone I have ever met. His eyes held the depth of the entire universe, yet they were focused entirely on me, a tired old pastor from a town no one has heard of. He was smiling. It was the smile of an older brother who has been waiting for you to come home from a long, hard journey. It was a smile that said, "I know everything and you are welcome here." When he said my name, William, it felt like every broken piece of my life suddenly clicked into place. I realized in that moment that I had spent my life talking about him, but I hadn't truly known the scale of his presence. I had preached about his love, but I had been using a thimble to describe an ocean. I felt a sudden wave of honesty wash over me. I looked at him and I didn't see a judge. I saw a friend who loved the truth more than he loved my reputation. I found myself weeping, not out of sadness, but out of the sheer relief of being seen. I told him I wasn't ready, that I had so many things left unsaid and undone. I thought about Linda. I thought about the way I had left the house that morning with just a quick kiss and a "see you later." I realized that if I stayed here, that would be our last moment. He walked with me through that field, and he didn't use words at first. He let me feel the weight of his companionship. There was no pressure to perform. Finally, he spoke, and his voice sounded like music and thunder all at once. He told me that I was being given a rare opportunity to see the world from his perspective, specifically the part of the world I had claimed to understand best, the union between a man and a woman. He took my hand, and the field around us began to dissolve into a different reality. We weren't in heaven anymore, but we weren't back on earth either. We were in a place of pure concept, a place where you could see the spiritual reality behind physical things. The first thing he showed me was the beginning. I saw the breath of God moving over the dust of the earth. I saw the creation of man, and I felt the profound intentionality of it. But then I felt a shift in the atmosphere. He showed me the moment when it was decided that man should not be alone. I felt the heart of the Creator looking at the man and seeing an incompleteness. It wasn't a mistake, it was a design. He showed me that the woman was not an afterthought, but the crowning revelation. As I watched the first union, I didn't see two people just standing together. I saw a spiritual light weaving between them, a golden thread that bound their souls in a way that made them a single living entity. Jesus looked at me and said that this was the design. He said that when a man and a woman come together, they are not just making a legal arrangement. They are creating a living, breathing testimony of the nature of God himself. He showed me that the man was designed to represent the sacrificial, protective love of the Christ, and the woman was designed to represent the life-giving, nurturing beauty of the Spirit's work. Together, they were a complete picture of the divine. Without one or the other, the picture was blurred. He showed me that the enemy of our souls hates marriage, not because it makes people happy, but because it is a mirror that reflects the light of God into a dark world. When that mirror is broken, the light is scattered. We moved through time then, watching the centuries unfold. He showed me the way people began to treat this sacred union. I saw it becoming a transaction. I saw it becoming a matter of property, of convenience, of fleeting emotion. He showed me the grief he feels when he sees people treat their vows like a lease that can be canceled when the conditions become difficult. He showed me a vision of a house. From the outside, it looked beautiful. It had a white fence and a green lawn. But then he pulled back the layers, and I could see the spiritual walls. They were thin and cracking. Inside, there were two people who lived in the same space, but were miles apart in their hearts. They spoke to each other, but their words didn't carry any weight. They were like ghosts haunting their own lives. Jesus pointed to them and told me that they had accepted a contract. They were staying because it was expected, or because it was too expensive to leave, but they had abandoned the covenant long ago. He showed me that a contract is a human invention designed to protect yourself from someone you don't fully trust. It's built on if. If you do this, I will do that. But a covenant, he said, is built on even if. Even if you fail, I will remain. Even if the fire grows cold, I will bring the wood. He showed me that his relationship with us is the ultimate covenant, and that marriage was meant to be the earthly shadow of that eternal reality. I felt a deep sense of conviction as I watched those people in that house. I realized that as a pastor, I had spent so much time telling people how to have a good marriage, how to communicate better, how to manage their money, how to raise their kids, but I had rarely told them how to have a holy one. I had focused on the comfort of the couple, not the glory of the Creator. Jesus then showed me something else, something that changed the way I thought about every conflict I've ever had with Linda. He showed me the third chord. He showed me a couple who were struggling, their faces etched with frustration and exhaustion. But as they sat together in their living room trying to work through a disagreement, I saw a light between them. It wasn't coming from either of them. It was coming from him. He showed me that when a couple invites him into their union, he doesn't just stand by and watch. He weaves himself into the very fabric of their relationship. He becomes the strength that allows them to forgive when they want it to be bitter. He becomes the patience that allows them to listen when they want to scream. He showed me that a marriage built on two people is destined to sag under the weight of life, but a marriage built on three, man, woman, and God, is a structure that can withstand the greatest storms. He told me that many people think they are failing because they are unhappy, but he said that happiness is a byproduct of holiness, not the goal itself. He showed me that the hard seasons, the times of sickness, the times of financial struggle, the times of silence, these are not signs of a dying marriage. They are the tools he uses to strip away the selfishness that keeps us from truly becoming one. He showed me that you cannot truly love someone until you have had to forgive them for being human. As we stood there, watching the spiritual reality of thousands of homes, I saw lights flickering on and off. Some homes were dark, filled with resentment. Others were glowing with a steady, warm light. He told me that the light was the presence of the covenant. It was the result of 1,000 small decisions to stay, to serve, and to sacrifice. I saw a vision of a woman sitting alone in a kitchen, crying because her husband had been cold to her for years, and I saw Jesus standing right next to her, holding her hand, weeping with her. He told me that he hears every sigh and sees every tear shed over a broken promise. He said that he is the guardian of the marriage bed and the witness of every word spoken in anger. But then he showed me the other side. He showed me an old man sitting by a hospital bed, holding the hand of his wife who no longer remembered his name. And I saw a light radiating from that man that was so bright it almost blinded me. Jesus said that this man was performing the highest act of worship. By staying, by loving without receiving anything in return, he was showing the world exactly what God's love looks like. It was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. As we continued to walk through that endless, glowing field, the presence of Jesus felt like a warmth that didn't just touch my skin, but saturated my very being. There was a sense of profound clarity, as if every question I had ever asked in my 35 years of ministry was being answered not with words, but with a deep, settling understanding. I felt like a man who had been looking at the world through a thick fog, and suddenly, the sun had burned it all away. He stopped walking and turned to me. He didn't speak immediately, but his gaze seemed to travel through every corridor of my memory. He reached out and touched my hand, and the sensation was like being connected to the very source of life itself. It wasn't like any human touch I had ever known. It was as if every cell in my body was being tuned to a higher frequency. In that moment, I wasn't just hearing a message. I was becoming part of it. The field around us transformed again. This time, I found myself standing in the kitchen of my own home. It was late at night. I recognized the scene. It was 3 years ago, during a particularly difficult season in our congregation. I saw myself sitting at the small oak table, hunched over a pile of notes for a sermon. I looked exhausted, my shoulders slumped, my eyes fixed on the paper. Then I saw Linda. She came into the room quietly, wearing her old blue robe. She stood by the counter for a long time, just watching me. I remember that night. I remember feeling her presence and not looking up because I didn't want to be interrupted. I saw her move toward me, her hand reaching out as if to touch my shoulder, but then she hesitated. She saw the tension in my neck, the way I was walled off by my own stress, and she pulled her hand back. She turned around, made a quiet cup of tea, and left it on the counter for me before slipping back to bed. I watched my past self reach for that tea minutes later, drinking it without even thinking about who had made it. Jesus stood beside me in my own kitchen, watching this with me. He didn't look at me with anger. He looked at me with a profound, quiet sorrow. He said, "William, look at the gold you walked past because you were looking for silver." I realized then that I had spent years thinking I was being a good provider and a faithful servant because I was working hard. But Jesus showed me that I had been treating my marriage like a garden. I only visited when I needed something to eat. I hadn't been tending the soil. I saw a vision of Linda's heart in those moments. It wasn't a place of bitterness, but it was a place of quiet, lonely endurance. She was keeping the covenant alone in the dark while I was busy performing the work of the covenant in the light. He showed me that every time I chose my pride over an apology or my schedule over a conversation, I was thinning the spiritual walls of our home. He told me that a man's first congregation is his wife. If he fails to lead her with sacrificial love, his words from a pulpit are just noise. He said that to lay down your life for your wife doesn't usually mean dying in a single heroic moment. It means dying to your own desires on a random Tuesday afternoon when you're tired and she needs to talk. It means choosing her over your own need to be right. Then the scene shifted. We were standing in a place that looked like a vast workshop, but instead of wood or metal, the materials were light and shadow. He showed me what happens in the spiritual realm when a husband and wife choose to forgive each other. I saw a couple. They were young, maybe in their late 20s. They were in the middle of a heated argument in a cramped apartment. I could see the words they were throwing at each other like jagged pieces of glass. But then I saw the man stop. I saw him take a deep breath, swallow his anger, and reach out to take his wife's hand. I saw the woman's face soften, her defenses crumbling as she chose to meet his reach. In that moment, a brilliant golden light erupted between them. Jesus explained that this was the third chord. He said that when two people choose the covenant over their own egos, they aren't just making peace. They are building something eternal. He showed me that this light was a physical substance in the spirit world. It was strong, durable, and beautiful. He told me that every act of genuine sacrifice in a marriage is a stone being laid in a temple that will outlast the stars. He showed me that the mathematics of the kingdom are different from the world. In the world, 1 + 1 equals two separate people trying to get their needs met. But in the covenant, he showed me a vision of two streams merging into one river. The individual streams don't vanish, but they become something that never existed before. They become a force that can carve through rock and bring life to a desert. He said, "The world tells you that you lose yourself in marriage. I tell you that you find the person I intended you to be only when you learn to give yourself away." He then showed me a vision that took my breath away. He showed me a lineage, a vast shimmering tree of people stretching through time. At the root of one branch was a couple who had stayed together through a long, difficult life. They weren't famous, they didn't have much money, but they were faithful. I saw their children and their children's children and so on for generations. I could see the spiritual picture that this couple had passed down. It wasn't a set of rules or a list of instructions. It was a lived reality, because that first couple had stayed because they had forgiven. Their descendants walked with a certain kind of stability and confidence. They knew deep in their bones that love was a thing that could be trusted. They knew that a promise was a sacred thing. Then Jesus showed me a different branch. This one was jagged and broken. At its root was a choice to walk away when things got hard. I saw the ripples of that choice move through the generations like a slow-moving poison. I saw children who grew up with a hole in their hearts that they tried to fill with all the wrong things: power, possessions, fleeting pleasures. They didn't believe in the staying power of love because they had never seen it. He told me that half the brokenness I saw in my small town, half the people I visited in hospitals and jails, were there because the image of the covenant had been shattered in their homes. He said, "The enemy doesn't want your happiness, William. He wants the testimony of your union. If he can destroy the picture of my love that marriage provides, he can leave a generation orphaned in spirit." I saw a young girl watching her father wash her mother's feet. Not literally, but in the way he spoke to her, the way he helped her, the way he honored her. I saw that girl grow up with a shield around her heart. When men who didn't know how to love her came along, she recognized the difference immediately. She wasn't fooled by cheap imitations because she knew what the real thing looked like. She had the picture of the covenant to guide her. Jesus looked at me with an intensity that felt like a fire. He said, "Tell them that the comfort they seek is a shadow, but the holiness I offer is the sun. Tell them that the hard days are not interruptions to their life. They are the very places where I am doing my deepest work. Tell them that I am not a spectator in their marriage. I am the foundation if they will let me be." He showed me a vision of a couple who were very old, sitting on a porch. They weren't talking. They were just sitting there, their hands intertwined. Their bodies were frail, but their spirits were so bright, they lit up the entire neighborhood around them. He said, "This is the goal. Not a life without conflict, but a life where every conflict was used to bring them closer to me and to each other. This is the glory I intended for humanity. I thought of all the times I had counseled couples in my office. I thought of the times I had given them advice that was just about making their lives more manageable. I felt a deep ache in my chest. I realized I'd been giving them a map to a small town when God was trying to give them a map to a kingdom. He told me that the covenant is a creative act. Every time a husband chooses to see his wife through the eyes of Christ, seeing her beauty even when she feels plain, seeing her strength even when she is weak, he is participating in her creation. He is helping her become the woman God intended. And the same was true for the wife. He said that a marriage is a place where two people are assigned the task of being the primary witnesses to each other's transformation. I saw a vision of the breath of life again, but this time it was moving between Linda and me. I saw all the years of our marriage as a long, winding path. There were sections that were dark and overgrown with thorns, the years we struggled with our health, the years we worried about our children. But even in the darkest parts of the path, I saw a golden thread running through the middle of it. I realized that the thread was the promise we made in that little church all those years ago. The thread didn't make the thorns disappear, but it kept us on the path. Jesus asked me, "Do you see why I keep my promises, William? Because my nature is the covenant. When you keep yours, you are participating in my nature. You are becoming like me." He then showed me a vision of the world as it currently is. It looked like a vast sea of people who were all desperately trying to connect, but were constantly being pushed apart by their own fear and selfishness. I saw marriages being torn apart by the smallest things, a misunderstanding, a moment of boredom, a desire for something new. He told me that people have been convinced that the new is better than the true. They have been told that their own individual fulfillment is the highest good, but he showed me that true fulfillment is found only in the surrender of the self for the sake of another. I saw a vision of a man who was tempted to leave his wife for someone younger, someone who made him feel alive. And then Jesus showed me the spiritual reality of that choice. I saw the man's soul begin to shrink. I saw the light in his life begin to dim. He thought he was finding freedom, but he was actually walking into a smaller and smaller room. Then I saw the same man choose to stay. I saw him go home, confess his heart, and do the hard work of rebuilding. I saw his soul begin to expand. I saw him become a giant in the spirit. Jesus told me, the cost of the covenant is everything, but the reward of the covenant is everything. As the light in that field seemed to intensify, Jesus turned to me once more. The air itself felt like it was composed of pure wisdom. And every breath I took seemed to fill me with an understanding of things I had spent a lifetime trying to grasp from books. He began to show me a vision of the world not as a map of countries and borders, but as a vast interconnected web of light and shadow. He showed me that the darkest places on the map were not where there was poverty or war, but where the light of the covenant had been extinguished. He pointed to a small spark of light in the middle of a crowded city. We moved closer, and I saw a man and a woman sitting in a hospital waiting room. They were exhausted, their faces lined with the strain of a child's long illness. There were no grand words being spoken. The man simply leaned over and placed a hand on his wife's knee. The wife rested her head on his shoulder. Jesus told me to look at what was happening in the spirit. I saw that same golden cord I had seen before, but now it was thick and glowing like a sun. It wasn't just connecting them, it was radiating outward, pushing back the shadows in that hospital hallway. He told me that their faithfulness in the middle of agony was a literal defense against the darkness for everyone around them. They were holding a perimeter of hope that they didn't even know existed. He showed me that when a husband and wife choose to be holy together, they aren't just improving their own lives, they are becoming a sanctuary. He said that the world is desperate for sanctuaries, but people keep trying to build them out of stone and wood, when the only sanctuary that truly matters is the one built out of a kept promise. We moved further into the vision. And he showed me the moment of my own death again. I saw the car in the ditch, the rain still pounding against the shattered windshield. I saw Deputy Miller's face, pale and determined as he worked on my chest, but then Jesus allowed me to see the spiritual activity in that ditch. I saw that even in my dying moment, the covenant I had with Linda was like a beacon. It was a tether that was still anchored to the earth, pulsing with 42 years of shared history. He told me that a covenant doesn't just bind two people, it binds them to the heart of God, and that bond is stronger than death. He then showed me a vision of what would happen if I chose to stay in that field of light. I saw my own funeral in the little church back home. I saw Linda sitting in the front pew. She was surrounded by our children and our friends. She was strong because she knew where I was, but I saw the gap my absence would leave. It wasn't just that she would miss me. It was that our living sermon would be finished. He showed me that there were chapters yet to be written in our story, chapters that were necessary for people we hadn't even met yet. He showed me a young couple who would move into our town 2 years from now. They would be on the verge of walking away from each other. He showed me that they would see Linda and me walking together in the grocery store or sitting together at a high school football game, and that the simple sight of us, two old people who clearly still liked each other, would be the very thing that would give them the courage to try one more time. He said, "Your life is not your own, William. It is a letter I am writing to the world. Are you ready for the letter to end?" I felt a surge of love for that young couple I didn't even know. I felt a surge of love for the town I had served for 35 years. But most of all, I felt a surge of love for Linda that was so powerful it felt like it was pulling me back toward the earth. I realized that I hadn't even scratched the surface of what it meant to love her. I had been a professional Christian, but I wanted to go back and be a professional lover of my wife. Jesus smiled, and it was as if the entire field of light leaned in toward me. He said, "The secret to a marriage that mirrors my love is not found in grand gestures. It is found in the hidden moments. It is found in the way you protect her dignity when she fails. It is found in the way you listen to the things she isn't saying. It is found in the way you see her as the girl she was and the saint she is becoming, all at the same time." He showed me a vision of the mathematics of the kingdom one last time. I saw a man and a woman standing back to back, facing a world of challenges. They looked small and vulnerable. But then, as they turned to face each other and joined hands, I saw them merge. They didn't disappear, but they became a giant, a spiritual giant that the enemy could not move. He told me that this is what he meant when he said the two shall become one. It wasn't about losing identity. It was about gaining a power that a single soul can never possess. He told me that the greatest harvest of a man's life is never his career or his reputation. It is the quality of the love he leaves behind in the heart of his spouse. He said, "When you stand before me at the end of all things, I will not ask you how many sermons you preached or how many people attended your church. I will ask you how you loved the one I gave you." The weight of that truth settled into my bones. I looked at him and I knew what I had to do. I said, "I want to go back. I want to love her well. I want to finish the testimony." Jesus nodded. He didn't say goodbye because I realized he was coming with me. He said, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age, and I am especially with you in the quiet of your home, in the heat of your arguments, and in the beauty of your reconciliation." Then the world of light began to recede. The golden grass, the vibrant sky, the presence of the Lord, it all began to pull back like a receding tide. I felt the weight of my 65-year-old body rushing back to meet me. I felt the cold, the wet, the sharp pain in my ribs, and the heavy thud of my heart starting to beat again. I heard the sound of the rain, which sounded like a roar after the living silence of heaven. I heard Deputy Miller shouting, "I've got a pulse! He's back!" I opened my eyes to the gray, wet world of a Georgia ditch. But I wasn't the same man who had swerved to miss that deer. I was a man who had seen the foundations of the world. I spent 6 days in the hospital. The doctors called it a miracle, and I suppose it was, but the real miracle happened when I finally got home. I walked into my house, and the smell of the place, the wood polish, the tea, the old books, it hit me like a physical embrace. Linda was in the kitchen. She looked older than she had a week ago, the stress of the accident having carved new lines into her face. I didn't say anything. I just went to her and I put my arms around her. I held her for a long time, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, realizing that this was the most sacred sound I would ever hear on this side of eternity. When she finally pulled back and asked me what I was thinking, I didn't give her a pastoral answer. I didn't give her a sermon. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "I finally see you, Linda, and I'm never going to look away again." We've spent the last 8 days talking in a way we haven't talked in 40 years. I've told her about the field and the light and the things Jesus told me about our union. I've apologized for the times I was a contract husband, and I've pledged to be a covenant husband for every second I have left. We've cried, we've laughed, and we've sat in a silence that finally feels full instead of empty. I look at the couples in my church differently now. I don't see their problems as things to be solved. I see their marriages as gardens that need to be tended with the water of the Spirit and the light of the Word. I tell them that the world will try to convince them that their marriage is a burden or a trap or a convenience, but they must remember the truth. I'm a preacher from a small town in Georgia who died for 12 minutes on a rainy Monday night. I'm telling you this because you don't need to die to see what matters. Don't treat your spouse as a roommate or a business partner. Don't wait for a crisis to realize that the person across the table is a sacred trust given to you by God Himself. The covenant is real. It is the most powerful thing we have. And if you invite Him into it, you aren't just surviving a marriage, you are building a kingdom.